How's it going, everyone? Welcome back. I am Bryce Newberger, and today I'd like to give you guys a brief overview of my book, Why I Cannot Be Atheist. It's a $5 book on the Google Play library. It's something that if you guys want to grab it, it's good to just thumb through at work or have around you just to be able to easily access and grab. The full thing is about 25 pages, very, very short book. But what I've done is I'm actually working on another book right now that is going to come out later, and it's actually more of a full-length academic book. But one thing that I wrestle with these academic books is they can put in so many fluffy words, and I'm really trying to get my academic book in a way that is approachable to everyone, but isn't dense and weighted down with just fluff and nonsense to make the publisher happy. So these pamphlets I've created on Why I Cannot Be are easy to grab and consume and return to. They're objects that you're meant to read multiple times. However, I have full videos on why I can't be Catholic, why I can't be Mormon, why I can't be Jehovah's Witness. One that does not have a video, however, is Why I Cannot Be Atheist. So I thought we'd take some time today, hang out together, and go through Why I Can't Be Atheist. This is a book I'm very proud of. It's something that a lot of thought, time, and energy and effort has gone into. So let's just dive on in. The beginning of the book starts with an introduction on why address atheism. And the main overarching reason for this is that my goal is not to attack atheists or browbeat them. My best friend is an atheist, though I'd say comes across to me more as an agnostic. He's deeply spiritual and deeply grounded in morality and wisdom, and I think he's just a great guy all around. So my goal is not to like lambast anyone or call them like a foolish or an idiot. The reality is that this is important, and Penn Jillette says if you believe that there's a heaven and hell, and people could be going to hell or not getting eternal life, and you think that it's not really worth telling them this because it would make it socially awkward, how much do you have to hate somebody to believe that everlasting life is possible and not tell them? So Penn Jillette, an atheist, though even he can understand that if you believe all of this, if I believe all this and I don't share it with the world, if I don't put out my good reasoning and arguments out there, then how much do I have to kind of hate you guys who are not Christians and are seeking, and for me to not tell you my reasoning, right? If I truly do believe in hell, then I'd have to be a pretty immoral person to keep all of this to myself. So that being said, I want to address atheism as a worldview. And atheism can sometimes come across like postmodernism, although I think fundamentally they're polar opposites. But atheism, common argument is, why would you? They reject the term atheist, right? They're like, well, you don't believe in magic. We don't call you like an amagicist, right? Like the belief in God. So a better way to think of it is materialistic naturalism. Right, materialistic naturalism, which has pervaded the scientific community. It has wormed its way in. The original scientists were Christians. The original, thought of the universe was, well, the sea must be Poseidon angry at us, right? The sky must be, El, the storm god, shaking his fist at us. It was Christians who said, well, God created a natural world, and we can learn how to weigh and measure it. And if there's a creator, then there is an intended purpose in the design, and we can map that out. And so a lot of the fathers of science are Christian and believed in order. In fact, actually, a big accusation against Christians when we first came on the scene was that we were atheists because of our monotheism. So I've got this quote here from Richard Lewontin. He's an evolutionary biologist, and I believe he's a Nobel Peace Prize winner. I could be wrong on the Nobel Peace Prize, but he is pretty serious dude in the science world. And here's his take, and I love that he kind of says it all out loud. It's a great credit to him that he just kind of came out and said this. So this is evolutionary biologist Richard Lewontin. He said, "We take the side of science in spite of the patent absurdity of some of its constructs, in spite of its failure to fulfill many of its extravagant promises of health and life, because we have a prior commitment, a commitment to materialism. It is not that the methods and institutions of science somehow compel us to accept a material explanation of the phenomenal world, but on the contrary, we are forced by our a priori adherence to material causes to create an apparatus of investigation and a set of concepts that produce material explanations, no matter how counterintuitive, no matter how mystifying to the uninitiated. Moreover, that materialism is absolute, for we cannot allow a divine foot in the door." And so he's very specific there. He says, hey, before we begin our experiments, we have an a priori commitment. We have made up our mind on certain things. And so if the experiment goes certain ways, if we find certain conclusions, we must reject them because we have a commitment to materialistic naturalism, that there is that this universe is all there is. And so there's some good videos out there. One I really like is by Christ, Culture, and Coffee, and they talk about how science can only answer scientific problems, and science is really only workable within the observable. And so you can't really have observable experimentation with things like the origin of the universe. We can look through telescopes, we can run experiments, and we're going to get into some of those, but you can't really weigh and measure philosophy. And a lot of science, when we get to the Big Bang, we get to theoretical physics, we get to black holes, or what they're now investigating to be maybe black holes don't exist, maybe they're black mirrors. When we get to when we get to the quantum stuff, and that is where we seem to be as a scientific community. When I listen to Neil deGrasse Tyson and people like that, it's like we're currently quantum pioneers. Yes, we want to go to space. Yes, we still want to get to the bottom of the ocean. But before we even finish getting to the bottom of our own ocean, we're like, look, outer space, and we went to outer space. And before we've even gotten to really become competent space travelers, we are now getting to theoretical physics. We're now getting into quantum exploration, which is very philosophical. There's mathematics and there's some science, but ultimately we're going to see in their experiments as we walk through this video that they're not getting the scientific answers that they need to prove scientific materialism or materialistic naturalism. So why address this? Well, my claim is going to be that what I love about and what I find, where I find an ally with my atheistic brothers is that they are reasonable. And they have an adherence and a commitment to reason, where when you get to the new age philosophy of postmodernism, that's where we're getting a lot of the clash politically. We're seeing politically people like, well, what is a woman? You can say whatever you want. We're just going to kind of make up truth. Your truth is not my truth. It's relative. And that is where we're beginning to see the culture collide. And so we're not going to go into that culture war in this video. There's plenty of room for other videos. We're actually going to take our allies on the cause and say, hey, atheists, we both agree that things should be reasonable and rational. And so I'm going to lay a claim that to be a Christian is the more reasonable and rational approach to this conversation. And that when you really get into where does the philosophy lead, where does science lead, and where does mathematics lead, that when you take the side of creationism over materialistic naturalism, you are actually more on the side of scientific evidence and mathematic probability. So we're going to get to some of that. None of my arguments here will be new, but all of the arguments that I've put together in this package are arguments that I have not seen packaged together before. And so a lot of times when you're watching a debate, when you're reading a critique or something like that, you want to see the full scope of the argument, and this is my attempt to basically leave nothing uncovered. It's going to be not that long of a video, but we're gonna put together all of the arguments together, and I hope I don't leave out much, though we're dealing with decades of research and mathematics, philosophy, and we've got a lot more to learn. And ultimately, what you're going to see from the atheistic, materialistic, naturalist side is they will say, yes, we do not have the answers. And where we're going to diverge from this is we can sit down and have a great conversation and we can agree on everything. And we can say, well, I'm going to say, it looks like all the evidence is pointing to God. And they're going to say, well, we haven't found the evidence that we need to say that there is no God, that there is no, that this universe is all there is. But we're going to keep looking. And if you listen to Neil deGrasse Tyson, if you listen to some of the people on the forefront of this argument, that's what they're going to say. Is like, well, you kind of get to the end of the argument where we currently are today, and we stare into the abyss of how far we have to go, and we say God, and they say not God. We just don't know. We're still learning. And that ultimately is where we're going to arrive at the end of this video. But I hope that I will show through this video that by the end of it, you're going to see that, well, to stand at the edge of the abyss of knowledge and guess God is going to be a better guess for those who don't believe, for the uninitiated, right? That you're going to say, well, the probability all points to God right now. And so if you say, well, no, not God, you're kind of being stiff-necked, you're kind of being stubborn, and you're being like Richard Wanton, who just says like, hey, like I get it. It's not pointing that direction, but we're going to aim that direction anyways, full steam ahead. And my caution there is it's going to weigh, and it's going to affect your experimentation, your philosophy, your reasoning, your logic, all of that. So why address it? That's why. So let's get to some of the questions. The universe is eternal, right? And so we have this issue with the universe being eternal. It's not, right? It came from the Big Bang. So whether the materialistic naturalist would say the Big Bang just happened, bang, there was everything. The Christian would say God spoke, or the deist, right? To even get like more open to everyone. Deists, creationists would say God spoke, bang, right? And so both have a bang, right? A creationistic, creation starts. So the universe can't be eternal. Now, creation ex nihilo, creation out of nothing, doesn't really work. So what we need for materialistic naturalism is we need the universe, the space that the universe exists within. We need that to be eternal, and we need creation to come through it. So what's going on is that I've heard this argument before from some atheists. They say that when you create a vacuum, you have this quantum particle effect where particles will pop into existence and cease to exist. And so when we look at this stuff kind of under the microscope and it's within a vacuum and we try to suck everything out, that we see particles, these quantum temporary particles, exist and stop existing. And that's their argument. Creation ex nihilo. We've witnessed a particle come from nothing. It didn't come from nothing, though. It came from energy. And so when you can create a vacuum, one thing you can't suck out of a space with a vacuum is energy. And so what you need for what would seem to be creation ex nihilo is still not ex nihilo. It's still not out of nothing. It's out of energy. It's creation out of energy. And so what you need is an eternal, uncaused quantum field. And that's been the current theory for materialistic naturalists. Well, how did we get creation out of nothing? A lot of Christians will just be like, you can't do it. We got to checkmate atheists. And the atheists are like, you're not listening to the argument. And so a lot of Christians can come across as unlearned or ignorant and stubborn. So we're like, we win. It's like watching two teenagers debate. I gotta tell you, as a youth pastor, I've seen a lot of teenagers debate, and it's like, wow, there's just nothing productive going on here. And then I've watched adults debate, and it's like, you're just like the teenagers. Everyone's like, I win. And no one's listening. To have a good debate, a good argument, and this is a compliment I get, and it's a compliment I cherish that people give me, is that I listen. And that I can repeat back their arguments. And so, good friend of the channel, Catholicism Wow. We don't agree. He's a Catholic. I'm not. I still can't be Catholic. But I do appreciate that he says, you don't get anything wrong. I'm not falsely accusing them. At least I'm playing up their beliefs correctly. So Christians, listen. It's this eternal, uncaused quantum field. So the idea is that there's energy that is eternal, And creation, like that quantum particle effect where they pop into existence and then cease to exist, the argument, if I understand it correctly, would be that, well, the energy existed and matter and everything kind of popped up out of that, and that's where we got the Big Bang from. And not to say it was one pop, it could have been, a million kind of particles before the right conditions sparked and everything from the universe came to be. So scientifically, you can't prove that. That's not a scientific claim. Scientifically, what we can prove is that you can't suck energy out of a vacuum, right? So even when we have a vacuumed space, energy remains, and so you can't really prove that energy was always there, and that's not really their claim, anyways. But for this to be the case, for materialistic naturalists to say creation ex nihilo is proven by these quantum particles popping into existence and disappearing, it doesn't work because it's not out of nothing. There's an energy field there. So to have the energy, then you need an eternal, uncaused quantum field, a quantum field of energy that's just always been there. And here's why that can't really happen. And it also violates the idea of the origin of the universe, the Big Bang, all of that, which is time and space came into existence at the Big Bang. If there are an infinite, and this is the Kalam cosmological argument, right? But if there is an infinite amount of moments before this moment, then we never arrive at this moment. And that is philosophical, that is logical, and that's mathematic. But that's not really a scientific claim necessarily, because we can't observe the entire timeline. We can't see the beginning of the universe. So this is where we are making scientific claims about the Big Bang, about the origins of the universe, but they're not actually scientific. Scientific in that realm of understanding has become more of a religion, of a movement, of a philosophical belief that lies within this materialistic naturalism that calls itself science. Just like Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons call themselves Christian, but they're not Christian. Materialistic naturalism, when it goes here, it's calling science what is actually more of a philosophical claim. And I would say philosophically that argument doesn't hold up. Logically that argument does not hold up. If you have an infinite amount of moments before this moment, we never reach this moment. And so logically there cannot be an eternal uncaused quantum field. The universe, even the energy of the universe, had to come into existence, or else we just can't be here. Now, different theories of time. We can get to, well, time is a flat circle, right? And there is an infinite, all of that. But the reality is that, again, that those are all philosophical claims. One that I'd love to have, actually. One of my big regrets is that I wish I could find people who are willing to just sit down with me and we could chat, not on a podcast, not anything. We could just chit chat, right? Just have fun. And just talk, because I love this conversation. I love being sharpened. And I find that people in the Christian world can't sharpen me in these areas. And I wish I had more access to people whose brains works this way. But I can't seem to find... Anyway, it's a whole thing. The present major, I'll read from my book here, the present major problem for atheism, if all physical existence depends upon a prior physical state, or depends upon prior physical states, then the question remains, what was the first physical state? If the quantum field is eternal, what sustains it? If the laws of physics govern it, what determined those laws? These are not trivial questions. They expose a fundamental issue. Material reality on its own lacks an explanation for its own existence. And so that's why we have to, and science can't really get us there, because we can't observe, weigh, measure how we got here. We can see to a certain degree in the past, and that's as far as we can go. We can't see the origin of the universe. So we have to rely on logic, mathematics, and philosophy, which is where we get to quantum theoretical physics. We look at the philosophy, we look at the math equations and go, okay, we can't perceive back there with our eyes and our tools, but can we get there with our minds? Can we logically travel back there? when it comes to all of this, well, what governs physical laws? Some would argue that these laws just exist as brute facts, but the answer is deeply unsatisfying. The mathematical structure of the universe is incredibly precise and finely tuned. The constants that govern physics, such as the speed of light, the gravitational constant, and the fine structure constant, fall within an extremely narrow range that allows for the existence of stable matter, planets, and ultimately life. Furthermore, if the universe were truly eternal, then mathematically speaking, time and energy should lead to disorder, not order. Entropy. Entropy is the natural byproduct of time. So some people think, well, we got to add more time to the experiment. Well, you add more time to an experiment, you don't get more order, you get more entropy. So the tendency of systems to move toward greater disorder. It suggests that an eternal past would have already resulted in a dead, chaotic universe. Instead, we see complexity, structure, and life. This is the opposite of what an eternal materialistic system should produce. We should see entropy and chaos. We shouldn't see order. And we're seeing this in space as well. It was interesting. I was listening to a talk the other day where it's talking about how we expect universes to expand. Instead, we're seeing them collect. And so it's an interesting, and I haven't fully fleshed out that thought. I'm still, again, on the edge of all of the arguments and gazing into the abyss with everyone else. But the more reasonable explanation is that that all of these problems point to a crucial question: what best explains the existence of the universe and the laws that govern it? And so the idea that the universe is eternal and uncaused, we're not seeing scientifically, philosophically, mathematically, logically, we're not seeing the argument unfold as we would need to see it. And so an eternal quantum field would be contingent. It would require laws to govern it and an explanation for its nature and an account of why it produces anything at all. A far more reasonable and philosophically sound explanation is that the universe had a beginning and was caused by something outside of itself, something beyond space, time, and matter, which is interesting because now we're getting to the theories of a multiverse. We're getting into theories of like other dimensions we can't perceive. And so that's why people are starting to have fun with like aliens and like Interstellar. Like, spoiler alert, the aliens aren't aliens. They're humans from the future that are working retroactively through time. And so for now, all we can really say is to conclude that an eternal uncaused quantum field does not solve the problem of existence. Even if we had one, where did it come from? What laws governed it? All of that. So the fundamental question of why there is something rather than nothing, it merely pushes the question back a step without proving any real resolution. So if a materialistic naturalist wanted to say, well, we need something from outside of this closed system to influence the closed system, like a blank page, right? Like if I got a blank page here and I want to write, this is the universe, right? Well, it doesn't count because we have a page to write on, but I'm going to need to introduce ink from outside to draw upon this. And if a materialistic naturalist wants to say, well, there's some other universe out there that got into ours and writes upon the page, I'm okay with that. We can, like, that pushes the conversation further because now at least we're talking instead of sticking with what I think is ultimately flawed madness to say this page somehow invents ink upon itself. So if a materialist naturalist wants to say, well, there's a multiverse and some scientist, some being, some force from outside the multiverse writes on the page, sure. And I call him God, but we can at least argue there. We can at least get the conversation moving. And that's my big point. And then we can look at, because then the argument goes further and we'll get into that at the end. But then why should it be God, the Judeo-Christian God, and not a scientist from the multiverse, right? Or some sort of extra-dimensional being? And that's a great conversation, and I want to have that conversation. We're going to tee that up at the end. So second chapter of the book focuses on abiogenesis, life from nothing. So even if we say, well, there's a Big Bang and the universe happened from nothing, ex nihilo, Big Bang ex nihilo, right? I would say Big Bang from God speaking, but or you want to say again, like, let's have fun. A scientist working from outside the multiverse, whatever. But let's say a scientist from outside the multiverse, some sort of extra dimensional being, throws that in there. Let's take God out of it. Some extra dimensional being, extra multiversal being comes in, sparks life and walks away, right? So now we're just talking open deism, and the deism that we're talking about is a scientist or a being or an alien, whatever. But that's it. Like, okay, and then they walked away, and they never bothered this universe ever again, right? Where did life come from? If I take a bag of bolts and shake them together, will they come to life, right? And so that is scientifically known as abiogenesis. And so they're trying to come up with and experiment with the idea of, if you take matter that is not alive and you infuse it with energy and motion and friction, will it be able to replicate itself? Will it give us a cell? Will it give us something of a protein? Will it come together for something that can eventually give us life? Current theory is that the deep thermal vents deep underground, where all of this, energy is spiraling up from, and as the dust collects within itself, that we will see life come from that, and that's abiogenesis. So atheists have to believe in, when I say atheist, again, it's materialistic naturalists. Someone cannot believe in God, but not be a materialistic naturalist. You could be a multiversal atheist, right? You could be this is all a simulation atheist, whatever. But for the materialistic naturalist branch of atheism, then you need to prove abiogenesis, right? There is no one working from outside of us. This is merely a closed system. So now, not only am I putting ink on the page, now not only is somehow we're getting writing on this page, but we need it to come to life. And so now we need this sketch to start breathing and moving and not even breathing. We want to get there. It needs to self-replicate. It needs to create the simplest, most basic form of life. And from there, now we can start evolution. And so actually in all of this, I'm not even going to attack evolution at all, because there's a lot of evolutionary Christians as well these days. And so it's kind of besides the point. It only muddies the water. Let's just get to abiogenesis. The idea that simple chemical compounds somehow assembled themselves into the first self-replicating organism billions of years ago. Atheists must believe that this happened, not because of overwhelming evidence, but because their worldview demands it. If there's no God or supernatural force, then life must have come from non-life, no matter how improbable or unexplained the process might be. And so the problem is that experimentation has not revealed this. The biggest issue for abiogenesis is the origin of biological information. Life is built on information stored in DNA, the complex molecule that contains instructions for building and maintaining living organisms. DNA operates like a software program with highly specific language-like code that directs cellular functions. And so evolution can only act on existing life. If you don't have existing life, it can't evolve. It's not self-replicating. There is no DNA. There's nothing to be edited. And so the idea that life arose from non-life purely naturalistically means, by purely naturalistic means, it's not just scientifically unproven, it's wildly improbable, bordering on impossible. Materialism demands that we believe in a process that defies probability, logic, and observation. And now you're stepping on the toes of science, because science is within the observable realm. We are not observing this scientifically. So someone is making a philosophical, religious claim, essentially, to say, well, I believe within my philosophy, within my religious a priori conviction, right, that the universe, that life came from non-life, and we are not observing that. That is flying in the face of what we see scientifically. And now you are free to explore that as much as you want, and please do, right? Like, we need to explore this. So we need someone looking in that direction. But we're not seeing it. We're not observing the phenomenon of abiogenesis. And so the far more rational conclusion is that life was designed. Just as a book requires an author, a software program requires a programmer, DNA, the most advanced information storage system known, requires an intelligent source. This points directly to a creator, one capable of establishing life with intentionality and purpose. And again, if an atheist wants to say, well, it was an alien who did it, well, it was a multiversal traveler who did it, whatever, sure, like we can go there, but you're no longer a materialistic naturalist who believes in a closed system. You believe in an open system. This system might be closed, but someone is introducing life. Even if you won't give the Big Bang thing, well, I believe in an eternal quantum field, right? Like whatever. Like no, this argument 2 does not require argument 1. So argument number 2, well, I don't know how we got here, but I can tell you life comes from non-life. Well, it doesn't. Not that we see. Not that we've been able to prove. And so could you prove it one day? Maybe. Right? Keep looking. But for now, when we get to the end of our knowledge and we gaze into the abyss of non-knowledge, of guesswork and philosophy and all of that, following probability and logic, you would be illogical and improbable and believing in miracles to think that life could come from non-life. It needs to come from somewhere. You don't have to believe in God, but you got to believe in someone introducing life onto the planet. It's like the alien movies, like Prometheus. It's a wild ride. I said in this book, I don't attack evolution at all. That's a lie. I haven't read this book since I wrote it like 2 months ago. I just realized, chapter 3. Macroevolution by natural selection. So evolution versus adaptation and understanding the difference. So one of the most misunderstood aspects of the evolution debate is the distinction between microevolution and macroevolution. Okay, so let me define those real quick. Microevolution refers to small-scale changes within a species, such as variations in beak size among finches or the development of antibiotic resistance in bacteria. These changes occur through natural selection acting on genetic variation. Microevolution is observable and well documented. So I believe in microevolution. Every creationist out there should believe in, even if you're like, there is no evolution, it's God, you should believe in microevolution. Don't confuse your terms. Microevolution is adaptation. So macroevolution, on the other hand, is the idea that these small changes accumulate over millions of years, leading to entirely new species, genera, or even phyla, such as reptile evolving into bird, or an ape-like creature evolving into a human. This has never been directly observed. We're looking for it. We're not finding it. Materialistic naturalists argue that macroevolution is simply an extension of microevolution over vast timescales. However, the key issue is whether small, gradual changes can truly account for the complexity and diversity as life as we see it today. Are small genetic changes enough to transform one kind of organism into another? Or does nature have inherent limits on how much change can occur? So we need to find the missing links, the gaps in the fossil record. And this one's interesting because I've listened to people argue one another. Ken Ham versus Bill Nye was an interesting debate and not one of my favorite ones. Both men have bachelor's degrees, I believe, and are not the best authorities on the topic. But when it comes to the gaps in the fossil record, these reptiles, turning into birds, one says we don't have them, and the other one says yeah, huh. And the best argument I've heard in these kind of debates is yeah, huh, nuh-uh. We've got them. Did you bring any with you? No. Well, show us proof. You can go see it yourself. They're in museums. So we would expect what we need is an abundance of transitional fossils. Fully formed species appear suddenly in the and so what we actually see, not transitional, but we see fully formed species appear suddenly in the fossil record with no clear evolutionary ancestors. The Cambrian explosion is a striking example. So the Cambrian explosion is a relatively short geological period. Nearly all major animal phyla appeared with no apparent predecessor. This is the direct contradiction of Darwinian predictions of slow, step-by-step development. Darwin himself acknowledged this problem, hoping that future discoveries would fill in gaps. Yet over a century later, these missing links remain elusive. And so the Homo genus which includes Homo sapiens, Homo neanderthalis, and Homo erectus, displays remarkably cognitive and technological sophistication from its earliest members. And so, what I'm hitting at here is some Christians think that Adam and Eve must have been Homo sapiens, and as Christians, even Christian like Genesis believing scientists who are paleontologists and get into history, we're seeing that there's a common ancestor through microevolution, adaptation, interbreeding with Homo sapiens, Homo neanderthalis, Homo erectus. There are variations within the Homo genus. And so Adam and Eve may not have been Homo sapiens. Christians out there, I'm going to get stoned for this, but that's where the science is leading us. This is not me coming up and just, believing what's there. Apologists are starting to come around on this. Adam and Eve may not have been Homo sapiens. All of humanity shares a common ancestor through microevolution, adaptation, and interbreeding. So if they can breed, they're still of the same genus, though. They're still of the same species. And so, for example, you can get a zonkey, a zebra donkey, you can get a liger, you can get these kind of animal variations, but they're not two species breeding to create a new species. They're within the same species creating an interbred mix of the same species. And so, or within the same genus, right? So, there is this, we're just not seeing that we're not even seeing that you can adapt, a creature can adapt into another species. We're not seeing that, through microadaptation becoming macroadaptation. And we're also not seeing that you can interbreed. We're not seeing that, there's enough adaptations where a fish can, produce a mammal. We're just not seeing that. And so now we're going to get into argument that every atheist is going to hate, but it's the best we have, and that's where it is. And it's irreducible complexity. The idea that some biological systems are so intricately structured that they could not have evolved gradually through small incremental changes. Biochemist Michael Behe, I hope I pronounced that name correctly, popularized this argument, pointing out that many biological structures, such as bacterial flagellum and microscopic motor used by bacteria for movement, require multiple interdependent parts to function. If even one part is missing, the system is useless. Evolution by natural selection requires each step to provide a functional advantage. If a complex system requires multiple components before it can function, how could natural selection preserve incomplete and non-working versions of it? So, in the book, you can read it. I get into the eye, the blood clotting system, the DNA replication process. Buy the book; it's only $5. But if you want to get the full, distinctions, and some of this stuff is so heady, you want to read it multiple times. But evidence suggests while microevolution and adaptation are observable and explain variations within species, macroevolution remains speculative and unobserved within the Homo genus. The fossil record continues to lack clear transitional forms, and biological systems exhibit a level of complexity that points toward intentional design rather than blind natural processes. If macroevolution is not a sufficient explanation for the diversity of life, then what is? And so we're just, again, science isn't leading us there. There's an a priori commitment from that biologist Richard Lawton has acknowledged, and it is that a priori commitment to a closed system, to materialistic naturalism, that is keeping us looking in these directions and affirming them as the origin of species. But we're just not seeing scientifically, within observed science, we're not observing that. We haven't observed it. Now, we've also not observed the creator coming down and speaking and creating animals. Both are unobserved. And so, again, this is a cumulative case to put it all together and say, we're not seeing it here, we're not seeing it here, we're not seeing it here, itemized individually. They say, well, then what are we seeing all together? We're seeing intelligent design. We're seeing someone interacting within a closed system of materialism to introduce material into the material world. And so there is the improbability of materialistic naturalism that we're building up to here. An eternal, uncaused quantum field, we don't see it. Abiogenesis, life from non-life, we're not seeing it. Macroevolution by natural selection, we're not seeing it. So to believe in materialistic naturalism requires an extraordinary amount of faith. You have to believe in an eternal, uncaused field, quantum field, where really the conclusions mathematically, philosophically, logically don't lead there. You've got to see abiogenesis, life from non-life. We haven't observed it, and we're not seeing it. Even just rationally, the arguments don't lead in that direction. And macroevolution by natural selection, we have not observed that. We are not seeing that. And so you kind of have to take all these things by faith. To have the current modern day materialistic naturalist view, you have to have a religious adherence, not based on science, not based on experimentation, not based on observation. You have to have an a priori commitment that Richard Lewontin shares and says, we just don't want God. We don't want him. You can't have him. And you can do that. You have the freedom to do that. But it takes faith to do that. It takes a little bit of nonsense to do that. You have to stand at the edge of the abyss with me, both of us holding hands and gazing into all that we don't know. And you have to say, I lean more towards the miracle that there is no God than the natural explanation that there must be some sort of creator. And so I touched on the Kalam cosmological argument that everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. Did the universe begin to exist? If the answer is yes, then the conclusion follows that the universe must have a cause. There's got to be a cause to why our universe exists. Whether it's God, whether it's, again, a multiversal scientist, some sort of extra-dimensional being, whatever. Like, we can have that conversation, but you can't say it's a closed system. You can't say that within nothing, something came from nothing. You need a quantum energy field. You need someone to have started that quantum energy field. You need there to be some sort of system to cook up the laws for that. And so scientific and philosophical evidence for the universe's beginning, the overwhelming consensus of modern physics points to the Big Bang as the origin of all species, time, and matter. If time itself had a beginning, then the universe is not eternal. So even just according to Big Bang theory, you can't always have had time. Time even had to come to an existence. The second law of thermodynamics, entropy, the measure of disorder in a system, increases over time. If the universe were eternal, it would have already run out of usable energy. And the impossibility of an infinite past, an actual infinite number of past events, is logically incoherent. So we need something eternal, not bound by time, immaterial, not made of physical matter, uncaused, since an infinite regress causes are impossible. So if someone created your scientist or extra-dimensional being, then who created him? And it creates an infinite regress logically, philosophically, mathematically. You need an uncaused being, right? You need an uncaused something to call. So whether, if it's a multiverse, well, then what created that multiverse, right? Infinite regress. Christians say, an atheist would have to say, well, who created your God, right? And we'd have to say, well, logically, the argument is he has to be uncaused. Even if we're so wrong, and that there is some sort of alien that created the observable universe that we have, logically, someone had to have created him. And until we get to, well, I would say logically, you would say, well, someone had to create him, then create his creator, then create his creator. Logically, you have to say, somewhere it all started. Somewhere there was something that was uncaused. It has to be powerful, capable of bringing an entire universe into existence. And this one is touchy, but it has to be personal. Able to choose to create rather than being bound by necessity. The description aligns remarkably well with the concept of God found in classical theism, particularly within the Abrahamic faiths. And so you need some being who chose to create and chooses to keep things in order. Otherwise, it all ends in entropy, right? So, but which creator, right? If some kind of creator exists, is it that scientist we talked about from a multiverse? Maybe one of them is eternal and uncaused. Is it Buddha, right? Is it the Jade Emperor from Buddhism? Is it which version of the Abrahamic God is it, right? So which creator, which God? Now we're shopping for gods, right? Which one is it? Well, historic concern when you're looking at religions, and when I looked at religions, which one should I be? there's a historic concern. One key factor that differentiates religions is their concern for historical accuracy. Many belief systems, such as Hinduism, Buddhism, and various mythologies, are not particularly concerned with historic verification, right? They're just poems, they're just stories, right? It's Kronos and Zeus is carving out his brothers from Kronos, right? Or Thor and Odin, right? Losing the eye, and the Ouroboros, all that. They're mythologies, and they're not concerned with the historicity, right, of their mythology. It's just a story. However, some faiths, the Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, make specific historical claims about the origin of the universe, the nature of God, and his interactions with humanity. If a true creator has revealed himself to mankind, then it is logical to assume that this revelation would align with the historical record rather than mere philosophic speculation. And again, we're standing at the edge of the abyss and looking at reason. We've gotten to the end of knowledge. We're just saying, okay, we're here at the end of everything we can see and observe. There's a lot more to go. We're still building a bridge there. Who knows if that bridge ever has an ending? But right now, from where we stand, logically, what do we believe? And it was just logical to think if there's a personal creator, that he would have revealed himself through history to us, if he's personal. And so we have to assume that this revelation would align with historical record rather than mere philosophical speculation. So I want to take a second though to say, is this a divine creator versus a divine dreamer, right? Are we within the dream of a being? Is everything, and then in which case nothing needs to really make sense because it's all just a dream. Some Eastern religious traditions suggest that reality itself is merely a dream, that we exist within the mind of a cosmic being rather than an independent structured universe. I like the argument from Universe Next Door, which is Sire. Yeah, James W. Sire. He says, any worldview that we exist in must be consistent with reality. So your worldview should be consistent with reason and logic and what your life experience is. And so dreams are chaotic, inconsistent, and subjective. Dreams have a weird way of moving about the world. I'm on a chapter right now in my book where I'm writing on the dreamscape, but it's like, you're in a shopping market one moment, and then you turn around and you're in a parking garage, and then you turn around and you're on top of a mountain, and you're like, this is not weird. So if we all exist within a dream, then we should see dream logic play out in the world, and we don't see dream logic. My book goes a little bit more deeper into that. But the miracle of Scripture, I've used this argument before, but when you look at the Bible, it is a miraculous document by the numbers, right? So, for example, if you take the number of surviving manuscript copies that we have, and the time gap between the original writing and the earliest surviving copies of those manuscripts, the shorter the gap reduces the likelihood of corruption and fabrication. So people say the Bible's been changed, or there's so much like the Bible's been changed. And I went through this with some Jehovah's Witnesses because I've got my Bible there in Greek and Hebrew in the original language. And as we find these copies, we find that they are within 25 to 50 years of the original writing of some of the letters, and they're unchanged. So when they say what's been changed, well, it had to have been changed either while the author was still alive, or it would have had to have been changed, in which case, was it really changed, or is that just a revision? Does it count? Or would have had been changed by his followers. And a lot of people, the reason that they say the change is for political reasons or philosophical reasons. And it's like, well, there's not a lot of room for politics and religion and philosophy to need to change a core document like this within 25 to 50 years. But anyways, if you get Plato's dialogues, they're written in 400 BC. The earliest copy we have is 900 AD. AD, not BC. So the time gap between that is 1,300 years. And we have 7 copies. 7. When you get to Caesar's Gallic Wars, written in 50 BC, the earliest copy we have is from 900 AD. The time gap between the time it was written to the document we have it is 950 years. We have 10 copies. We have 10 copies of Caesar's Gallic Wars. Tacitus's Annals of History, written in 100 AD. The earliest copy we have is 1100 AD. That's 1,000 years from the time that the original was written to the earliest copy we have is 1,000 years, and we have 20 copies. The New Testament was written somewhere between 50 to 100 AD. not somewhere. The New Testament is a collection of letters and documents and historical letters that were sent out, and records, the Gospels, all that. The earliest copy we have is 125 AD of the complete New Testament. The time gap between the letters and all that, 25 to 50 years. Shortest. The closest one was the Gaelic Wars, 950 years. Everything else, 1,300, 1,000. You can go through a lot of these, but we have over 5,800 Greek copies. We have a total, that's just Greek. Of all the languages, we have 24,000 total manuscripts. The Annals of History from Tacitus, we have 20 copies. That's the most copies of all these documents we've talked about so far. New Testament, 24,000. So when you're just like creating a spreadsheet of textual criticism, just looking at documents, well, the Bible's like any other religious book. Mathematically, it's glaring. If someone's taking inventory of these things, it is kind of a miracle that we have so many, so well preserved. And it all came from just a small movement. We're talking New Testament, not Old Testament. So small movement of people who were persecuted. Their Messiah figure was crucified, and there was 12 of them. One of them betrayed him. Had some other followers, but was mostly stoned and accused, and crucified. Not stoned. Jesus wasn't stoned, but crucified. And yet this small little movement. Why do we have all of this? Again, it's not a smoking gun, but it is important. And this is why we have a cumulative argument to say, as we stand on the abyss of knowledge, the end of the abyss, and we're gazing out, okay, well, what is it? You can't ignore this. You shouldn't ignore this. If you do, you're ignoring good evidence. So we have manuscript evidence and the preservation of Scripture. We can recreate over 99%, and the small percentage of textual variants consists primarily of spelling differences and minor word changes. We find Dead Sea Scrolls back up these things. We have all of this stuff going on. The Bible's internal consistency and prophetic accuracy. Okay, the Bible was written over 40 authors, 3 continents, 100 over the course of 1,500 years, yet it contains and maintains a unified message about God's nature, humanity, sin, and redemption. Even more astonishing is the Bible's prophetic accuracy. It contains hundreds of specific prophecies, many written centuries before their fulfillment. The fall of Tyre is said in Ezekiel 26. The prophecy stated that Tyre would be destroyed, its rubble thrown into the sea, and fishermen would spread their nets there. Alexander the Great fulfilled this in 332 BC by using the ruins of old Tyre to build a causeway into the sea. The rise and fall of empires, Daniel 2 and 7. Daniel predicted the rise of the Babylonian, Persian, Greek, and Roman empires in precise details, centuries before they happened. The birth of Jesus in Bethlehem, Micah 5:2. Written 700 years before Christ, this prophecy predicted that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem, despite Mary and Joseph living in Nazareth. Jesus' crucifixion, Psalm 22, Isaiah 53. These passages describe Christ's crucifixion, including the piercing of his hands and feet, gambling for his clothing, and his silence before his accusers, all written hundreds of years before crucifixion was even invented as a form of execution. And again, people say, well, they changed it. Like they wrote it back in there. Well, not according to the Dead Sea Scrolls, carbon dating, everything that we have proves that crucifixion was referenced centuries before crucifixion existed. And so if the Bible were merely a human book, the probability of all these prophecies being fulfilled by chance is astronomical. The scientific and mathematical improbability of such accuracy suggests divine authorship. It's one of those things where if something happened and people write down that it happened, you want to verify, well, what's the chances that it happened, right? If I say, someone walked in front of my house right now wearing a blue shirt, it's not really that great of a claim because people wear blue shirts and people pass by my home all the time. So the audacity of the claims, the more audacious the claim that God incarnated himself, came down, preached to us the way we should go, and died on a cross for our sins. It's a pretty extreme claim. And it's going to need some pretty extreme evidence. And all of the evidence points pretty specifically to that just happening. So we're left with this mathematical miracle, more surviving manuscripts than anything else, closest manuscript to original time gap, unparalleled consistency despite thousands of years of transmission, and prophecies that have been fulfilled with remarkable accuracy. Okay. And then, did Jesus really exist, right? So It's not a popular argument these days that Jesus just didn't exist. He did. One of the most significant aspects of Christian belief is the historicity of Jesus Christ. Skeptics have raised doubts over the years, claiming that Jesus may have been a mythical figure or that the accounts of his life were fabrications. However, historical evidence overwhelmingly supports the existence of Jesus. Non-Christian sources such as the works of Jewish historian Flavius Josephus and the Roman historian Tacitus, provide external verification of Jesus' existence. Josephus, writing in the 1st century, briefly mentions Jesus and his antiquities of the Jews, referring to him as a wise man and the Christ. Similarly, Tacitus, writing in the early 2nd century, confirms the execution of Jesus under the Roman governor Pontius Pilate. These independent sources validate the fact that Jesus was a historical figure who lived and was crucified in the 1st century. Additionally, the New Testament itself, though theological in nature, presents an account of Jesus' life, teachings, and crucifixion that is consistent with what we know of the historical context of the time. So, in the book, I'll get into the empty tomb, the eyewitness testimonies, the transformation of the disciples. We're nearing the hour mark, so I'm going to wrap up. This is why you should buy the book. But here we debunk the hallucination theory, the stolen body theory, and the swoon theory. All well debunked. Any good atheist, materialistic naturalist debater will lose credit within his own community if he tries to throw those out. Why Jesus' identity confirms the truth of Christianity is because we have this Jesus problem. Throughout his ministry, Jesus made claims that, if true, would signify his divine nature. He claimed to be the Son of God and the Messiah, and he demonstrated his authority through miracles, teachings, and the ultimate act of resurrection. Jesus' teachings about love, forgiveness, and salvation stand in stark contrast to the legalistic and ritualistic practices of his time. His death on the cross for the sins of humanity and his resurrection from the dead is the defining moment of the Christian faith. The resurrection confirms Jesus' identity as the Son of God and the only path to salvation for humanity. His death, burial, and resurrection are not just theological constructs, but historical facts that demonstrate the truth of his divinity. So you should buy the book if you want to get into a lot of this, because I can lay it out more structurally. You can engage with this whole conversation we're having. You can reread my words. There's a lot more in here that I can't fit in just for the sake of time. I have a bunch of citations and resources. The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins, God's Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything by Christopher Hitchens, The Selfish Gene, Richard Dawkins, Atheism, The Case Against God by George H. Smith, The End of Faith. I've got a lot of good atheistic sources in there that I think will show I've done a lot of good research. And then we have, of course, the Kalam Cosmological Argument by William Lane Craig, The Case for Christ, Case for the Creator by Lee Strobel, Reasonable Faith, Christian Truth and Apologetics by William Lane Craig, the Teleological Argument and Exploration of Fine-Tuning of the Universe by Robin Collins. So there's good resources in there too for you to engage with, and I've even got good websites in there that you can visit. All of that. So that being said, this was a brief, an hour-long introduction and kind of run through of my book. You should definitely check it out. You should definitely buy it. It's worth keeping around. Whether you agree or disagree or whatever, it's good to have all of this written within 25 pages. An hour, 57 minutes so far of me speaking, and 25 pages you can kind of read through it quicker, see my arguments laid out more. And this is why I wrote all of these videos. This is why I turn them into books, because books can be a little bit easier to grapple with some of these arguments that we make. And I've done all the legwork for you. For Christians who enjoy this, I've had people ask for my notes. I've had people ask me to break down certain things. You can get it all in this book for $5. So cheap books. Guys, I hope this has been enlightening for you. I hope it's been a case of good conversation. If any atheist has pointed to this video and just completely disagrees with everything, I promise you, I've got friends and opponents of the channel who have engaged me in debate or called me out, and I go watch. I love it. I love this topic. I like to just live in this world. My books are my treasures, and my conversations like this are just like my theme parks. So I love this stuff. So if someone wants to try and pick all of this apart, man, I'd love to see a response video, and I'd love to follow up on that response video. Whatever the case may be, I hope you guys are pursuing truth. I believe as a Christian, Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and that no one gets to the Father except through him. So ultimately, no matter what religion, creed, faith, belief system, whatever you fall into, if we're all pointing at truth, we can walk towards truth together, hand in hand, throw out red herring arguments, throw out straw man, and just have great, good conversations. We don't need to be afraid of truth. We don't need to have poor debate tactics with one another. We can just enjoy pursuing truth together. And all my dear friends, the closer you draw to truth, I will believe, the closer you draw to Jesus. Ultimately, if you want to hold my hand and come around me in truth and try to lead me away from Jesus, if I'm going towards truth, then I believe I will go towards Jesus. But as long as we're both going towards truth, I'm going to be a happy camper. So I'd love to have that conversation with you. God bless you guys. And I will end this right on the hour mark. All right. Bye.